both of Alexander and some of Hercules, of Hector and Lysander, and such great names as these. But of all...
Hello and welcome to today's Battletech presentation. We're taking a customer request here. They brought in an Exterminator and wanted me to talk about it. So I had to gather a whole lot of documents because I don't have a whole lot of experience with that mech personally. Not a thing that comes into the factory very often. And it's one that shows a little bit why ComStar was not to be trusted in a way. Weird case here. The original technical readout series that ComStar was releasing when they released the 2750 edition, which was to talk about the royal battle mechs of the Star League and the vehicles associated with it. What they put in were the regular battle mechs of the different models, which were also used by the Star League and generally add a royal version. They never talked about the actual royal versions, just the standard version, the Exterminator being the best example of that because the one that they published in that 2750 technical readout didn't feature the most important bit of equipment that the Exterminator had, which is the Chameleon LPS and Null system, which is what allowed it to basically be invisible. Of course, part of it is probably because ComStar didn't have all the specs and all the details on these machines because most of the royal machines were taken away during the Exodus. But I've managed to pile on all the data that I could, gathered battle ROMs from all sorts of people, and we're going to talk about what some people can call Andrei Kerensky's last ride, and a battle mech that is a bit odd in its position and rather popular at the time. Let's go with the real basics here. In warfare, disrupting and destroying the enemy leadership is generally a way to have a successful campaign and successful missions. You can read Sun Tzu, you can read Clausewitz. Those are the really old ones, and they'll already tell you what you're supposed to do in these situations. I mean, you can read some of the later one like Guderian as well if you want more details on armored warfare. While nowadays you do have a lot of officers running around in battle mechs, you still have mobile HQs. We've got a picture of one here in the back. Supply depots, field bases, all sorts of things that can be damaged and destroyed to basically ruin your enemy's infrastructure and make them really, really sad that they brought some fancy equipment to the battlefield. But really, how do you sneak in with a 12-meter tall war machine? Especially seeing how sensors in battle mechs are now extensively advanced. You've got radar, lidar, sonar in many cases. You've got satellite uplink. You've got dropship uplinks. You've got quite a variety of things in that 3-ton module in the cockpit that if you were, let's say, in the early 20th century or late 20th century, I should say here, would be revolutionary to anybody who'd get that kind of thing. So how really do you do that? Most people nowadays, when they think of stealth technology on battle mechs, they'll think of Liao's proprietary stealth armor technology. It's still proprietary, even though some people have stolen it and reworked it, but they're the ones who produce the vast majority of it. And this is a type of armor which requires you to carry an ECM, which is not a bad thing if you're trying to be stealthy anyways, but they do generate a healthy amount of heat just to keep it running, just because you have to shutter some of the heat sinks and some of the internals to make it work properly. The Star League era tech for stealth technology was really split into two systems, the Null signature system and the Chameleon light polarization shield. That's an hard word to say. We generally say Chameleon LPS, which overall were more efficient than the stealth armor and did not require that ECM to be built in, so it had a few advantages. All of this basically is integrated into the mech's internal structure and the armor without a significant amount of weight, but it does take a significant amount of space internally to make sure that everything is set up. Stealth armor does a little bit the same, so the technologies are not quite the same, but end up having more or less the same result overall. The first mech to officially be equipped with that full suite of stealth equipment was the Exterminator in 2630, and it was followed up by the much smaller Spectre in 2640. 40. Those two machines were not meant to work together, but I've got battle ROM of basically lances of 2 Exterminators, 2 Spectres working together to take out enemy leadership locations. They're both built for that express role. Basically, go behind enemy lines, blow up whatever's back there, and come back. They were generally attached at regimental level rather than in specific lances. But like I said here, I've seen regimental level lances of Spectres and Exterminators if you look at orders of battles and things like these from the Star League era. Your 65-ton Exterminator 4D is fast and agile because it's one of those fast heavies with a Magna 390 XL engine, which is really big. You get a top speed of 97 kilometers per hour, and you can also jump 180 meters using Chevron 2 jump jets, which are very efficient as well. They're not the most common type of jump jets out there, but I've seen them on quite a few mechs. Outside of that, your basic Exterminator is nothing super fancy, however. You got a standard skeleton, 10.5 tons of standard compound armor, and it's kept cool by 10 double heat sinks, which is a bit fancy, but not super fancy, especially not during the Star League era and not nowadays. For increased protection, you also get an anti-missile system. I guess it can be useful. As far as weapon goes, it's a little bit of an odd duck. You got a 10 rack LRM with 1 ton of ammo, 2 medium lasers in each arm for a total of 4, and a small laser mounted on top of the head. You do have a limited amount of firepower on there, but what you're really aiming at is those mobile headquarters and field bases, so you don't need anything really long range outside of that LRM. I might have put an SRM on there if I was the lead engineer on that design, but that's just me. The only real difference with the 4C version is that the 4C has the full stealth suite, while the 4D is the standard design. As I was saying earlier, there is a Royal Regiment version of the machine, which is the EXD4DD, and there's also an EXD4CD, but that one we have extensively limited knowledge of. Your LRM-10 and anti-missile is removed to be replaced by an ER large laser and 2 extra medium laser and an extra double heat sink. The ER large laser is going to generate a whole lot of heat. Not sure it's a super great trade-off. The medium lasers are also moved from the arms to the torso, making it more or less a zombie mech. You can lose the arms, and it's going to keep going. Of course, having an XL engine doesn't make you the greatest of the zombie mechs. Clan Jade Falcon apparently had their own version of this in the early Clan era during Operation Klondike, where the medium lasers were replaced by early versions of the Clan ER medium lasers. It must have given them a very nice amount of punch at short range. During the Amaris coup and the subsequent succession wars, hunting down and destroying exterminators had become a national pastime, and entire lances, if not companies, were set up to basically find them and blow them up. The SLDF did take off with a large number of them, especially the fancy ones with the stealth equipment, and the great houses wanted the exterminators that were left to be taken out, even if they weren't the fancy stealthy ones. Outside of a small number of them residing with the Intersideral Telecom and Banking Corporation, the Exterminator was pretty much completely gone by the end of the First Succession War. The Exterminator, probably one of those modernized version the clans used, was the last ride of the founder's brother, Andrei Kelansky, and he was piloting it during Operation Klondike, where he was killed. You can get a good reading on that in the Propaganda Trio Visions of Rebirth from the Clan Jade Falcon founding of the Clans series. I actually kind of like a lot of those books from the clans and the trios from the clans because they're not doing as much propaganda as some of the Inner Sphere books and trios. It's a little bit weird once you get into it. We don't really have a whole lot of details. Some people say it was a 4D, some people say it was a 4C, some say it was a 4DD. We don't have the clear details here. I don't have the battle ROM of that particular situation. And just like in the Inner Sphere, Anderi was basically hunted and destroyed by a group of mechs made to chase down his exterminator. Now, if you go in a little bit deeper, was that group paid and driven by Nicholas Kerensky, or were they actually rebels, or were they actually other clans? We'll never be able to answer that question without getting someone calling you for a trial of grievance. Later on in 3007, Kalon Industries and the Free Worlds League wanted to supplement their income using a design that they had access to, as their Wolverine production was not keeping up with demand, and they wanted something else to prop up their profits. General Systems, the original creators and builders of the Exterminator, lost their factory on CAF in 2793, and the design at this point had fallen into public domain because nobody was building it and nobody had claimed it. The only big issue was that most of the equipment could not be reproduced, but Kalon really didn't care and decided to make an EXT-4A, or what we sometimes call the Eno Exterminator in name only. Officially, about 25 of those were actually built, and they should have disappeared after the Fourth Succession War because 25 of them were destroyed. But you always end up seeing one pop up on Solaris. There's a Mech outfit that was using one in the War of 3039. A few weird versions running during the early clan invasion. Who knows how many were really built and really deployed in the end. The 4A uses a more reliable Vox 325 rather than the XL engine, so it actually is tougher just because of that. Gives it a top speed of 86 kilometers per hour and a jump range of 150 meters. Not as good, but still very decent for a 65-ton mech. You only have 11 heat sinks to keep yourself cool. With 4 medium lasers running, you're going to start eating up a little bit. It's not terrible, however. The other specs are more or less the same. You've got the same armor, the same skeleton, because you had that already as standard equipment before. AMS no longer being available, it was replaced with a regular M100 machine gun and half a ton of ammo, which is plenty enough to take care of infantry, and I might say here that it's a better setup than an AMS on a hunter-killer mech. It's not very good, it's pretty darn cheap, and it does the work really, really well. Therefore, it's probably one of the better mechs in that particular construction type. Of course, if you have to compare it to the Wolverines that were being built by Kalon and things like that, it's probably not a top seller or even a high-quality machine. At that point, really the only people who still had Exterminator was ComStar, and they decided to punch and kick each other with them during their little Ollie War. The 5 Series Exterminator started in 3060 with the 5E, which is meant to be a dedicated, improved NARC delivery system. You've got 4 tons of reloads on those improved marks, but at that point it's useful because you're going to have probably 2 tons of regular homing pods, you're going to have explosive pods, and you can even have EMP pods. All of them are pretty useful. The jump jets are removed and it's replaced with a mask, so the mech is meant to run on the ground a lot faster rather than jump around. I think that's a bad idea. The fact that the Exterminator could be used as a cavalry mech was very useful, but still, it's still more mobility in the long run. You got a C3I in order to share targeting information with the rest of the members of your level 2, which is what those were meant to be used as. And all medium lasers are swapped with ER medium lasers just so the pilot can die of heat exhaustion while not getting more punch. Is it a great machine? I think I prefer the original Exterminator to it, but still not a terrible idea. A further evolution of the design was the 5F series, who keeps the jump jets off and keeps the mask on, and takes out the INARC to replace it with a 7 tubes MML launcher with the ability to shoot both LRMs and SRMs. The lasers are also taken off and replaced with light PPC. So you got a light PPC on each arm for medium long-range sniping. Well, long-range sniping, but medium damage. I'm never a huge fan of those light PPCs, and some conditions I can understand why they're being used. And the head as a ER small laser. It's a sniper. It's odd. I'm not sure I would make a special effort to get that particular machine. There was talk of a 6CS series, which would return to the CPLS and null signature system, but I don't think it even reached production, or if it reached production, it was so limited that we never really seen one. It has no jump jet, it has no mask, it has a light PPC in each arm, and a medium pulse laser in the head and center torso. You have that 7-tube MML there with 3 tons of ammo, so you can be quite polyvalent on there, and it's protected by a case too, which is what is more or less standard nowadays. I've never seen it. I don't think it's a terrible machine, but once again, I think the original Exterminator is still a more interesting machine in the long run. There is a new design, though, for the Exterminator, which came out of nowhere, and I don't mean nowhere the planet, I mean nowhere because nobody knows who's actually building the darn thing. Whoever it is, though, they're really rich because this thing is really expensive. It has a composite structure, which is extremely fragile, on a 325 XXL engine with a supercharger, so you can get a top speed of about 108 kilometers per hour in a straight line. It uses stealth armor, 13 tons of it, and a arm-mounted Guardian ECM because you've got no room in the torsos for the first line of defense, and the second line of defense is a laser AMS. For weapons, it does have a decent amount of punch with 4 variable speed medium pulse lasers, which are interesting in this case, a 10-rack MRM, and an head-mounted ER small laser. Like I said, I'm not sure who's building that thing. I'm not sure where they're coming from. It is super fragile, but with stealth armor, maybe it's going to compensate. I'd have to see more battle ROMs with that machine. As the grandfather of stealth mechs, the Exterminator really has a place in history, but your chances of seeing one is pretty low, at least in its stealth setting. There might still be some of them with that stealth armor. There might be some odd ComStar configurations that pop up from the Jihad era, but nowadays there's a lot more new options for stealth mechs. Many of them are better equipped, and they're far easier to replace since they're still in production. I also think that in the same era of stealth mech, the Spectre was a little bit better in its dedicated role, and we'll probably have to talk about it at some other time. So I thank you very much for listening to me for so long. I hope you guys have a very nice rest of your day, and I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.